Hello and welcome to the SBK Betting Podcast. My name is Tom Collins, and for this episode, I'll be filling in as the host as our regular presenter, Jess Stafford, is away on a much-deserved break. Fortunately, I'm not here by myself. I'm joined by my trusty companion, Ross Millar. Ross, how are you doing? And are you still in flat mode, or are you switching to the jumps very soon?
I'm still in flat mode, TC, but I'm itching towards jumps mode. And to be fair, I've stayed in flat mode a lot longer than I would normally. So it's been an exciting season on the flat, which has helped. But yeah, starting to see some of these stable tours and news of jockey changes with stables and whatnot starts to get you thinking of the mud flying soon.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It's only a couple of weeks until we see Chepstow, one of the brilliant opening fixtures of the jump season. We'll be covering that, I'm sure, on one of these podcasts. But for now, we're still in flat mode. We've got the Ayr Gold Cup this weekend, the Mill Reef at Newbury. But before we touch on the weekend action, let's look back at last week and some talking points. We had St. Ledger Day at Doncaster, got moved from Saturday to Sunday, but it went ahead. We got to watch that classic with some fantastic three-year-olds, albeit not an amazing edition, in my opinion. And we also had Irish Champions weekend at the Qhanjar and Leopardstown. 2 days of great action. Luxembourg won the Irish Champion Stakes. Pearls Galore took the Matron. Highland Princess won the Flying Five. And Kyprios just proved his dominance once again in the Irish St. Ledger. Ross, let's talk about Irish Champions weekend first. Who was your standout performer? Was it any of the names I've mentioned there, or was it another horse that I haven't yet mentioned?
So, I mean, you couldn't fail to be impressed by Kyprios. He just looks so straightforward, so tough, everything you sort of expect a Galileo to be, honestly. And we had Giant's Causeway as one iron horse. I sort of said to a friend of mine, this could be the second iron horse because he just doesn't look like he ever wants to lie down. And then the one that really impressed me was Tahira, Dermot Wild's filly. Thought she looked exceptional because I think Meditate perhaps wasn't suited by the ground over that 7 furlongs, but she shot clear. Ryan Moore took a length out of them going to the furlong pole. And Tahira just had everything covered, quick and tight, twice in that soft ground. I think she's an exceptional filly. She deserves a place at the head of the market for next year's 1,000 guineas.
Yeah, they're the two horses I was actually thinking of. I was going to mention Tahira if you didn't. Kyprios, I think, is the next Yates. He headed into the Irish St. Ledger £2 worse than Yates at this point of his career. Yates finished second, Kyprios won. I think they're very similar types, and I would imagine next year Kyprios is just going to be dominant in the staying division. And Tahira, as you mentioned, very impressive in the Moyglare, beat Meditate, now 4-1 favourite for the 1,000 guineas. Love did the double. She won the Moyglare back in 2018 before winning the 1,000 guineas in a 3-year-old campaign. At this stage, I know we're a long way out, Ross, but at this stage, is Tahira the horse to beat in the Classic?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of anything that's near her. You got Statuette that hasn't been seen. She was impressive. She was a very big physical, so you'd expect her to be better at 3. Of what we've seen so far, she's the standout. Statuette is perhaps the one that could yet challenge for sort of top honours going into the Guineas, I think.
Yeah, definitely. She's an unexposed and unlikely race type, and Aidan O'Brien just does so well with his horses too. Let's briefly touch on the St. Ledger as well while we're here. The winner was Eldar Eldarov. I didn't like him beforehand one bit. I thought he was, very short in the market given what he'd achieved. Favourite New London, who was my selection last week's pod, came second. He was a short price, a little bit disappointing in my opinion. Giavolotto was leapfrogged from fourth to third after a steward's inquiry. What did you make of this year's St. Ledger?
It was an exciting race to watch, wasn't it? Because of the scrimmaging, and you could watch it a few times and get a good look at it. But it was a disappointing heat, really, for the final classic of the year. You know, are we ever going to see a horse go for the Triple Crown again, TC? I mean, it seems unlikely to me. You'd be more likely to get a horse trying to do the Triple Crown if the third leg was over 6 furlongs than if it was over 1 mile and 6. So it's something needs to be done. And I think it sort of comes all back to prize money, and people are wanting a quick bang for their buck. Fast 2-year-olds, breeders are providing what owners and buyers want, and these lovely staying types are a fair rare commodity now. So it's a worrying time, I think, for the St. Ledger, because it's been a while now since we had a good edition, and this was probably as poor as it's been for a number of years, I would have thought.
Yeah, if you look at the RPR, the winning RPR for Eldar Eldarov, it's the lowest since 2016 when Harbour Law won the St. Ledger. So it was a pretty weak edition on paper beforehand, and it kind of proved to be that after the races as well, in my opinion. I still think the best horse finished second there in New London, but maybe he just didn't show his best that day. And before we go into this week's action, one more thing we should talk about, and that's Baaeed, the horse that's been on everyone's lips all season, the talking horse. A fantastic horse for William Haggas and Shadwell. Brilliant, just wins every race he runs in. We thought he might be going to the Arc, but no. William Haggas has confirmed on Wednesday this week that he's going to the Champion Stakes. Do you think that's a good decision?
I think what I think doesn't matter, the same as sort of all of Twitter, really. It doesn't matter what we think. William Haggas was being pretty clear all season. The Arc was never mentioned until he looked like a thorough stayer last time over his first try at 10 furlongs. I think if that's what they want to do, great. The Arc does tend to get run on soft ground. And I know people were saying, with the weather forecast that, more likely to get soft ground for the champions. But he'll only be running over 10 furlongs on soft ground. A mile 4 on soft ground in France is a very different proposition. They clearly want him to go undefeated. I think winning over a mile 4 and winning the Arc, I can't imagine it's going to make a whole lot of difference to, breeders wanting to use him. They'll want to use him regardless. I'm just very happy we're going to see him again. He'll probably go off short odds on, and he'll probably canter home. But what a lovely thing to have a horse come right through its career, unbeaten, go out sound when it's intended to go out sound. And we've lost a lot of horses this year. The Derby winner hasn't run since. They're a very fragile animal. Let's celebrate William Haggas managing his career so beautifully. And, with Flat, we haven't got to wait that long, and we'll see Baby Baaeed on the track soon.
Yeah, very true. I know people have strong opinions, as you mentioned on Twitter, about this. I'm very indifferent. I don't think the Arc is this race that everyone should always look forward to at the end of the season as, the Cheltenham Festival of the flat season. I just think if you want to run in the Arc, you run in the Arc. And if you want to go to the Champion Stakes, you go to the Champion Stakes. There's more value in this horse, Baaeed, winning his last race than going to the Arc and potentially being beaten. So, as you've touched on, I think it's probably a wise decision. He should win that race. It should be a good renewal as well, I think, if Baaeed goes there and others. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that in October, but that's still a month away. Let's get back to this weekend's action now. Ayr Gold Cup is the featured race. There's the Mill Reef at Newbury, but this 25 runner handicap has to be the race that we talk about. They're going to hurtle down the 6 furlong course at Ayr. Generally pays to be drawn middle to high, but at the same time, you've had good horses running well from low draws in recent years. Great Ambassador last year was drawn 1 and finished 2nd, so you can't write off the low draws. £150,000 up in prize money, over £77,000 to the winner. So it's a big pot, a race that many trainers will have targeted. The current favourite is Khanjar. He's 4-1. He's trained by William Haggas, that we've already touched on, also owned by Shadwell, much like Baaeed. This is just his 7th career start. He's going to be a very short price favourite in here. 8-1 for Comanche Falls, second in the market. Then you've got the ever reliable Summergan in behind, and last year's winner, Bielsa. Ross, extremely tricky race. Not an easy one for us to be talking about, but it's a race that every punter wants to find out our opinions of. So who do you like in the Ayr Gold Cup this year?
Well, TC, let it not be said that the SBK podcast, the content isn't tailored around what the punter wants, not what the pundit wants, because 25 racing over 6 furlongs would not be my choice for a race to look at. I think 3-year-olds haven't got an overly great record in this. I think when I looked, I could see 2 in about the last 10 years, but a few that have hit the frame. But I tend to perhaps have a slightly better grasp on the 3-year-olds, having done juvenile watch for a couple of years. So last year's 2-year-olds coming in as this year's 3-year-olds. And so I got 2 I like at fairly decent prices. The first is Giz a Sub from Kevin Ryan. He'd been really disappointing at the start of the season, but he was gelded before his last run at York last time. And despite getting bumped coming out the stalls, which kind of was curtains for the race, to be honest, he stayed on quite nicely. He was beaten just over 3 lengths under fairly tender handling from Graham Lee. He's clearly a high-class horse. I mean, he chased home Lusail in the Gimcrack last year. Kevin Ryan thought enough of him this year. His work's not been good enough to run him in the Commonwealth Cup just 2 starts ago. He's off a decent mark now. He's got plenty of ability. He's not one to rely on for certain. But if that gelding operation did mean he took a step back in the right direction last time, and I liked how he finished his race off at York, even though he came from a fair way back, I think he's got decent claims over this 6 furlongs. Only had 9 starts. He's still fairly unexposed as a sprinter. And then the next one I like is Admiral D. I think 7 furlongs stretched him last time at Doncaster. I think coming back to this fast run 6 will suit him beautifully. He's £2 lower now than when chasing home a really smart filly, A Day in Asia, at Ascot 2 runs ago. Now she's £10 higher now. off a mark of 98, and he was trying to give her £7 on that occasion. It was a decent run. I think he's another horse with decent form at 6 furlongs. Oshie McSweeney's very good for his £5 claim. He's impressed me this year. And again, just another one with just 11 starts. So he's got plenty of progression. I think those two, both around about 25 to 1, would where I'd be splitting my stake and looking.
Yeah, fair enough. A couple of long shots. This is the kind of race that you want to be finding a big price horse. You have to admit, you've got multiple places up for grabs, and we've got a short price favourite in Khanjar, or relatively short price given the stature of this race, and then big prices elsewhere. So look, I can't fault you for putting up two big prices. I think Giza Sub is currently 20s, Admiral D is 25s, but both of these horses might slightly drift before the off or get backed if Ross's money's on. I'm not overly keen to take on Khanjar. Now, I'm going to, because he's a short price, but at the same time, I think he's by far the most likely winner. William Haggas is probably the best trainer at placing his horses into big field handicaps that we've got in Britain. I think he's phenomenal at doing that. He manages to campaign his horses so well that they don't go up the handicap despite potentially being group horses. This horse is running off a mark of 100. I loved how he got on top late last time at Haydock, and this faster gallop will suit him. So there's the case for Khanjar, but he's not the selection. The selection is 5,000 to 1. And this horse was really highly tried early in his career. I remember writing a stable tour back in 2020, and Andrew Balding said this horse could be the next big thing. Not exactly those words, but in other words. And he was actually second in the Mill Reef on this day back in 2020. He went from there and ran in the Dewhurst, finished 7th. It wasn't a great effort. And since then, he's found life really difficult. But that's largely due to the fact that he's been far too keen in his races. He just wants to go hard early and just waste so much energy that he just has nothing left in the closing stages. Now, he ran in this race last year as a 3-year-old off a mark of 102, and he finished 9th of 24. But he was drawn low, down over the far side, and apart from Great Ambassador, no horse got involved. So I think he actually ran far better than what it suggests on paper. He took advantage of a falling mark last time out at Goodwood. He ran off just 91, travelled beautifully, finished his race well, and beat a course specialist in Many a Star. Under a £5 penalty, off a mark of 96, I think he's a major player in here under Graham Lee. Don't love his draw, but Khanjar's drawn in 5, he's drawn in 3, and Bergerac, who's one of the pace players, is drawn in 8, so we should get a nice toe into the race. Right then, Ross, this is the moment where the listeners actually start to pay attention. They think in the Ayr Gold Cup, 25 runners, I can make a case for plenty here. What they want to know is, who is your best bet on Saturday? Please tell them.
They'll be disappointed to hear, TC. I found it really hard to find a nap. I had a few going into the weekend. High Bank from Godolphin was entered up. I thought he looked like a good one, all non-runners. So I've come down on one that I actually mentioned in my Racing TV post this week, early on in the stages, and that's Wallop in the Mill Reef. Now, goes in with just one run under its belt. Be some effort to shed its maiden tag in this Group 2, but it doesn't look overly deep to me. Should Have Been a Ring was a horse I followed after its first run. I thought it was a certain winner next time, and it did. But I had no aspirations of it being a Group 2 horse when I watched it early in the season. I think this is a weak enough Group 2. Wallop had nice form on its debut at Newmarket. Ran really well behind Noble Style, who went on and bolted up in the Gimcrack, and Millstream, who at the time people sort of used to knock the form against Noble Style. But Millstream ran really well in the ACOM at York. Didn't get the trip of 7 furlongs. So the bare result is not a true reflection of how he ran. So I think Wallop's got decent form coming into this. Pretty much without exception, all of Richard Hannon's have taken a big step forward from their first run to their second this year. He's a double figure price in a race that I think looks weak enough. He's a bit of a wild swing of a nap. And if you're cautious like me, you might want to play it each way.
Yeah, Wallop's going to be around 11 to 1 with SBK for the Mill Reef, which is the 250 at Newbury on Saturday. Very interesting selection, I have to say. I didn't have a good look at the Mill Reef before this podcast, but when I saw your message to say that you're going to be napping Wallop, I definitely had a look. And yeah, I think it's an interesting bit of placement. They obviously think a lot of this colt. Richard Hannon Sr. won the Mill Reef 4 times in his career as a trainer. He's the joint winning most trainer of this race. Richard Hannon Jr. is yet to train a winner, so potentially this year will be the time where he gets into the winner's enclosure. My nap is far less sexy, let's say. It's in the 426 at Newmarket, and it's a horse called Sea Galaxy. Now, on her first 2 runs, the Sea the Stars filly looked pretty slow, over a mile for trainer William Haggas again. But last time out, in a 2-runner race at Windsor, she was unconsidered in the market, which is ridiculous for a 2-runner race no matter what. She tracked the Godolphin trained favourite, And she quickened up nicely and stayed on powerfully over the 1 mile 2 furlongs to beat the 85 rated runner-up. Sea Galaxy now enters handicap company off a mark of just 78, which I think is pretty lenient. There's plenty more improvement to come over this trip, and she's my idea of the best bet on Saturday. Now, SBK offers place-only odds on every race every day, so don't forget that, and make sure if you do like your place plays to go over to SBK and have a look at our odds for every race. Ross, I'm going to leave this section up to you this week, because the only race that I've really studied in great depth for place plays was the Ayr Gold Cup, and we've already talked about that. But I know you've got one for us in the place play section. Who is it?
So again, at Newbury in the 2:15, the Carl Burke trained At a Girl. She's been pretty disappointing this year, having shown a glimpse of ability last year. She ran in some decent races and ran quite well on a number of occasions. Took a big step back in the right direction, I thought, last time, staying on really well late in the day over 5 furlongs, beaten about 3 lengths behind Manakan. Now, Manakan is 7-2 favourite. She's around about 25-1. She'll definitely improve for stepping up to 6 furlongs. She is a pound worse off at the weight, so it's unlikely to see that she can legitimately overturn Manakan. But I think she can get close to him, and if she gets close to him, she's going to go close in the race itself. So at a decent price, and I think she's overpriced, At a Girl in the 2:15 at Newbury.
Yeah, another interesting selection. Big price there. Neil Callan takes the ride. He hasn't had a great couple of weeks. He's only 1 from 30, but he's a good rider, very experienced, so that wouldn't be necessarily a negative. This horse has placed twice at double-figure prices in her career already, so I can definitely see the angle there. And it's actually her first run over 6 furlongs since July 2021. So if you believe she's going to improve for that, there's definitely a big angle, and at a big price, why wouldn't you take the chance? One stat attack this week. Last week's stat attack won. I remembered this time about who I put up. So we're 2 out of 2 for the last 2 weeks on stat attack. So hopefully make it 3 out of 3 here. And this stat attack comes at Wolverhampton, for those of you who love your all-weather racing, which I'm sure there are plenty. Trainer George Scott, he's 6 from 13 with his runners at Wolverhampton this year. 46% strike rate and a £1 level stakes profit of plus £22.99. Phenomenal stats for a trainer that wouldn't be fighting that high at any other venue, really, this season. His sole runner on the card is a horse called Cariad, a 2-year-old filly. She goes in the opening nursery at 4:50. I was in the Sky Sports studio when she last ran. She looked beaten as they turned for home. She was 5 lengths back and going nowhere, and she flew in the closing stages to get up and win. I think she'll back up here, and the stat attack just increases my confidence. Now, that brings us to the end of this week's podcast. A reminder that all new SBK customers, you deposit £10, you get £30 in free bets. T's and C's do apply as always. Please remember to subscribe if you're watching this on Spotify or on YouTube, and like the video as well. Those likes do mean plenty. There's lots of podcast content coming up in the future for the rest of the flat racing season, and then to the jump season as well. We've got a new NFL podcast as well on Spotify if you want to check that out. And we've got loads of other stable tours and footage from our SBK ambassadors. Good luck with all your selections this week, especially you, Ross, with those couple of big prices. Hopefully we get a couple of winners that we can boast about next Friday. And we'll catch everyone next week.